The night began like any other, quiet, still, and peaceful. The wind brushed softly through the wheat fields, and the stars above the valley shone like silver dust. Eli and Mark, two young farmer brothers, had finished their long day of work. The animals were fed, the tools cleaned, and the soft hum of crickets filled the air. But as the moon rose higher, something strange happened. The calm night sky began to change. The stars dimmed one by one, and a deep red glow spread across the clouds. At first, they thought it was lightning or a faraway storm. But then the ground began to tremble. A sound ripped through the air, a deep, roaring thunder that didn't come from the sky. Eli froze at the door, his hand gripping the wooden frame. Mark stepped out beside him, eyes wide, heart pounding. The red light grew brighter until the whole valley looked like it was on fire. Then, from the heavens, something blazed down like a falling star, leaving a burning trail across the dark. It hit the forest just beyond their field with a sound so powerful that the earth shook beneath their feet. The air burned hot, and a gust of smoke rolled over the farm. Without speaking, the brothers looked at each other. Eli, the older one, nodded once. They grabbed their lanterns and ran toward the forest. The smell of smoke grew thick. Trees crackled with small fires, and the night was filled with the sound of something groaning, something alive. Mark wanted to turn back, but Eli's voice was steady, firm. Someone could be hurt. They pushed through the smoke until they reached a small clearing, and then they saw it. At the center of the scorched ground lay a creature neither of them had ever seen before. Scales glimmered like silver and blue in the flickering firelight. Long wings were folded awkwardly, one of them torn and bleeding. The creature's chest rose and fell, each breath ragged. But the thing that made both brothers freeze wasn't its wings or claws. It was its eyes. They were not the eyes of a beast. They were wide, frightened, and full of pain, almost human. Mark whispered, "Eli, it's a dragon." His voice was barely a breath. Eli couldn't answer. He had heard stories of dragons, monsters of war, beasts of destruction. But the creature before them didn't look like any of those. She looked young, weak, and scared. Her claws trembled as she tried to push herself up, but she fell again, letting out a soft cry that broke through their fear. It wasn't the roar of a killer. It was the sound of someone hurt and alone. Eli slowly stepped closer. The heat from her body was strong, but not burning. He saw the deep wound on her side, like a spear had torn through her scales. Without thinking, he tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against the wound. The dragon flinched but didn't fight. Her eyes watched him closely, confused. Mark stayed a few steps behind, shaking his head. "Eli, we can't. If someone sees us helping her." Eli didn't look back. "If someone was hurt, would you walk away?" Before Mark could answer, a new sound broke the air. Voices, rough and angry, coming through the trees. The brothers ducked low. Between the trunks, they saw torches moving 5, maybe 6 men, all armed, their armor marked with the royal crest. "Spread out," one shouted. "The creature's wounded. It can't be far." The brothers exchanged a terrified look. These were bounty hunters. Everyone had heard the news. The king had placed a reward for any dragon captured alive. To protect one meant death. But when they looked back at the creature, her eyes were pleading. She didn't speak, but her gaze said enough. She was begging them not to let those men find her. Eli whispered, "Help me." Mark's face went pale, but he didn't argue. Together they moved quickly. They wrapped a large tarp from their supply shed around the dragon, tying it with ropes to cover her shining scales. She was weak enough to move barely. The brothers used the farm's old wagon to pull her toward the barn, keeping low and quiet as the hunters' voices grew closer. Twice, torchlight passed near them. The brothers held their breath, hearts pounding so loud they thought the men might hear. At last they reached the barn. They rolled open the doors, led the wagon inside, and closed it tight behind them. Inside the shadows, the dragon whimpered softly. Eli lit a small lantern, careful not to make too much light. Her eyes glowed in the dimness, soft gold now, watching him. Mark whispered, Eli, what are we doing? If the soldiers find her here. Eli wiped the sweat from his brow. Then we'll lie. We'll say we saw nothing. Mark stared at his brother, torn between fear and loyalty. Finally, he sighed. You're mad. Eli gave a small smile. Maybe, but she's just a child. The dragon blinked slowly, as if she understood. She made a small sound, a hum mixed with breath, that almost sounded like a word. It wasn't in any language they knew, but it was soft, grateful. The brothers worked through the night. They cleaned her wounds, gave her water, and laid straw under her to rest. When Eli offered her food, she didn't touch it, just looked at him with quiet eyes that glowed like candlelight. Hours passed. The forest outside grew silent again. The red sky faded back to black. Near dawn, Eli sat beside her, exhausted. He studied her face. Small scales like tiny jewels along her cheeks, faintly glowing symbols across her neck. There was something ancient about her, something pure. Yet she was fragile like a lost child. We'll keep you safe, he whispered, just until you can fly again. The dragon's eyes softened. For a brief moment, Eli thought he saw her smile. Then her head rested on the straw, and she drifted into sleep. Outside, the brothers stood together in the cold air, watching the smoke rise from the forest. Mark broke the silence first. You know this means trouble, don't you? Eli nodded slowly. Yeah, but I'd rather face trouble than leave her out there to die. Mark looked at the horizon where the first sunlight began to break. Then we keep her hidden. No one can know. The brothers didn't realize that their decision, born from kindness, had already set something powerful in motion. The sky was calm again, but far away, deep in the mountains, other dragons had felt the fall. They would come searching soon. And the men who hunted her wouldn't stop until they found what they lost. As the morning light touched the valley, the brothers walked back to the barn. Inside, the dragon stirred in her sleep, faintly glowing under the lantern's dim light. The sound of her slow breathing filled the air, peaceful and strange. Eli smiled quietly. Rest now, he whispered. You're safe here. But as he closed the barn door, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger had begun. Something that would change everything they knew about their world. They thought they had saved a lost creature. They didn't know they had just saved a princess. And by doing so, they had written the first line of a story that would echo through time. The morning came quiet and cold. Mist rolled over the valley, wrapping the fields in a pale silver glow. Eli and Mark worked their usual chores, but their minds weren't on the animals or the soil. Every sound made them glance toward the barn. Inside, under old tarps and hay, slept the creature that had fallen from the sky. When the chores were done, Eli slipped inside. The dragon was still there, her breathing slow and steady. Her silver scales shimmered faintly even in the shadows. He could see where her wounds had started to close, but the dried blood on her wings made him frown. He walked closer and whispered, You're healing fast. The dragon stirred, her golden eyes flickering open. For a moment, Eli thought she looked frightened again. But when she saw him, she blinked slowly, like she remembered his face. It was strange. She didn't look like a beast anymore. Her expression had something human in it, something gentle. Mark entered quietly behind him, holding a small bucket of water. She drank last night. Maybe she'll drink again, he said, keeping his voice low. But when the dragon tried to move, she groaned softly, her wing twitching weakly. Mark stepped back, nervous. Eli, we can't keep her here forever. If someone finds out. No one will, Eli said firmly. We'll fix her wing, feed her, and she'll leave. No one has to know. But deep down, he wasn't sure if he wanted her to leave. That evening, a light rain fell outside. The brothers ate quietly by the fire, their thoughts heavy. The king's soldiers had passed through the nearby village earlier, asking about a fallen creature. That meant they were close. Mark kept pacing near the window. If they come to the farm, we're done for. Eli looked at him calmly. Then we don't let them come. How? Mark's voice cracked. We're farmers, Eli. Not fighters. Eli stared into the flames. Then we protect her the only way we can. We stay quiet. We act normal. The next few days passed like that. Long hours of pretending everything was normal, and long nights caring for the creature. Slowly, she began to trust them. When Eli came near, she didn't flinch anymore. Sometimes, she would watch him with curiosity, tilting her head when he spoke, as if she was trying to understand the words. One night, as the brothers worked in the barn, something happened that changed everything. Eli was cleaning her wound when he noticed a strange light moving along her arm. It looked like glowing lines under her scales, symbols that pulsed like heartbeats. He stepped back, startled. "Mark, look!" Before Mark could speak, the dragon shuddered and gasped, her whole body glowing. The light spread, brighter and brighter, until they had to shield their eyes. When it faded, the brothers blinked through the haze and froze. Where the dragon had been now lay a girl. She was young, maybe 17 or 18, with long silver hair that shimmered like moonlight. Her eyes were the same golden color as before. She wore no armor, no clothes. Just a thin layer of scales along her shoulders and arms like a faint mark of what she had been. She looked at them in silence, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Mark stumbled backward, nearly dropping his lantern. "Eli, what is this?" Eli didn't move. His breath caught in his throat. "It's her." The girl tried to stand, but her legs trembled. When she spoke, her voice was soft, strange, like a melody wrapped in broken words. "Please, don't fear." Mark stared at her. "She can talk?" Her voice wavered. "I try, learn your tongue." Eli slowly stepped closer, his eyes calm. "We're not afraid," he said softly. "You're safe here." The girl blinked, confusion giving way to relief. She sank back onto the hay, breathing hard. Eli pulled his jacket off and placed it around her shoulders. She held it tightly, like it was the first warmth she'd felt in ages. That night, they learned her name, Liara. She spoke in fragments, struggling to shape human words, but her meaning was clear enough. She had been chased, hunted for something she carried. A secret. When Eli asked what it was, she only said, "Something kings fear." The brothers didn't press her. They could see how tired she was. But later, when Eli stepped outside, Mark followed him. The moonlight washed over the fields as they stood in silence. "She's not just any dragon," Mark whispered. "There's something different about her." Eli nodded slowly. "I know. But if she can turn into a human, maybe that's why the soldiers want her. Maybe she's dangerous." Eli looked back at the barn, where a faint golden light glowed through the cracks. Or maybe she's just scared. The days turned into weeks. Liara began to heal faster than any creature they'd ever seen. She learned words, simple ones at first. Water, thank you, safe. Sometimes, she smiled, and when she did, it felt like the whole barn lit up. The brothers grew used to her presence, even started talking to her during meals. But the peace didn't last. One night, the brothers heard voices again outside. Different this time. Not soldiers. These men were rougher, dressed in dark clothes and carrying strange weapons. Bounty hunters. They were searching through the woods, whispering to each other. "Tracks here," one said. "Large. Recent." Eli motioned to Mark to stay quiet. They moved silently around the back of the barn. The hunters stopped only a few yards away, holding up a glowing crystal that pulsed faintly. One of them smirked. The king's mages were right. The creature's magic still lingers. "She's nearby." Eli felt his stomach twist. They were using tracking stones, magic tools that could sense dragon energy. He looked at Mark. "We need to hide her deeper," he whispered. But it was too late. The barn door creaked. One of the hunters had slipped inside. Eli's heart pounded. He could hear Liara shift inside, alarmed. Mark grabbed a pitchfork and nodded toward the door. They had no weapons, no armor, only courage and desperation. When the man stepped in, lantern raised, Eli swung a shovel hard across his arm. The lantern fell, breaking apart. Fire burst across the straw. "Run!" Eli shouted. Liara turned toward the flames, her eyes glowing gold. Her hands rose, trembling, and a wave of blue fire rolled out from her palms. Not burning, but pushing the blaze away. The hunters outside froze when they saw it. "She's here!" one screamed. Eli and Mark grabbed her hands and pulled her through the back door. They ran toward the fields, the smell of smoke chasing them. Behind them, the barn burned, its roof collapsing in flames. The hunters followed, shouting, their torches bright against the dark. They reached the old stone well near the field's edge. Liara stumbled, breathing hard. "No more running," she whispered. Her golden eyes flared, and for a second, her shape flickered. Half dragon, half human. "I will protect." But Eli grabbed her arm. "No. If you fight, they'll call the army. You'll never be free." Liara looked at him with confusion and sorrow. "Then what do we do?" Eli turned toward the forest. "We hide, and tomorrow we figure out the rest." The three of them disappeared into the trees as the burning barn crackled behind them, lighting up the night sky. By morning, the fire had died. The hunters found nothing, no bodies, no tracks. The brothers' farm was nothing but ash and smoke. But deep in the forest, under the roots of an ancient oak, Liara sat between the two brothers, wrapped in a cloak, eyes full of questions. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. And for the brothers, their world had just crossed a line it could never return from. They had saved a dragon. Now they were part of her secret. The sun rose pale and thin over the forest, its weak light cutting through the mist. Smoke still drifted in the distance where the brothers' barn had once stood, a black scar against the valley's edge. Eli and Mark sat quietly near a small stream, their faces smeared with dirt and ash. Beside them, Liara slept curled beneath Eli's old cloak, her silver hair tangled and wet with dew. The night had been long. They had barely escaped the fire, and the sounds of hunters shouting had echoed for hours through the trees. Now, in the soft quiet of dawn, it felt as though the world was holding its breath. Mark broke the silence first, his voice low and tired. "Everything's gone, Eli. The barn, the tools, even the animals. We have nothing left." Eli didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the stream, watching it catch bits of red sunlight. "We still have her," he said finally. "We still have a chance to make this right." Mark sighed, rubbing his face with shaking hands. "Right? What's right anymore? We're hiding a dragon, Eli. You know what the king does to people who protect them. He'll burn the whole valley if he finds out." Eli turned to look at Liara. She stirred softly, whispering something in her sleep, words they didn't understand. For a moment, Eli saw her as she truly was. Not just a creature of fire and legend, but a girl caught between two worlds, hunted by both. "She didn't choose this," Eli said quietly. "And maybe neither did we. But she needs us." Mark wanted to argue, but when Liara opened her eyes, the words caught in his throat. She sat up slowly, her golden gaze calm but sad. "I dreamt of my home," she said softly, her voice still strange and musical. "I saw my mother's fire, my father's mountain, all gone." Eli leaned closer. "Gone." Liara nodded. "Humans came. Long ago. My people hid. The kings want our blood, for magic, for power. I ran." Mark looked down, guilt flashing across his face. "Humans did that?" Liara didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "Not all humans. Two saved me." Her eyes met theirs. "You." The brothers said nothing. The forest wind moved between them, quiet and cool. Over the next few days, they traveled deeper into the woods. Eli led them toward the old mining caves in the cliffs, where no one ever went anymore. There, they built a small shelter of stones and branches. They caught fish from the stream and shared whatever they could find. Liara healed quickly, her wounds almost gone now. But something about her changed too. Her power was growing stronger each day. Sometimes, when she was alone, the brothers saw blue light shimmer around her hands or heard faint humming in the air, like the sound of fire burning beneath the ground. Eli asked her once what it meant. Liara looked at him and said, The magic returns. It follows my heart. The more she healed, the more danger they were in. The soldiers hadn't stopped searching. Riders passed near the forest, leaving marks on trees, setting traps. The king's banners were seen in nearby villages. The bounty on the silver-scaled creature had doubled. One night, as rain fell in thin silver lines, Liara stood outside their cave, staring up at the dark sky. Eli joined her, his cloak pulled tight. "You're thinking of leaving," he said. She didn't look at him. "If I stay, they will find you. They will hurt you." Eli shook his head. "We'll protect you." Liara turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly in the rain. "You already did. You gave me shelter. You gave me kindness. But my presence will destroy your home. My kind bring war." Mark stepped out of the cave behind them, arms folded. "She's right, Eli. We can't fight an army." For a moment, none of them spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence. Then Liara reached out her hand. A small flame danced above her palm, glowing blue and soft. "This fire is my soul," she said. "When I leave, it will remember you. If you ever see it in the sky again, you'll know I kept my promise." Eli frowned. "Promise?" Liara's voice trembled, though her face stayed calm. 17 years from now, when the stars return to this valley, I will come back. I will find you. I will keep you safe as you once did for me." Mark laughed nervously. 17 years? You'll forget us by then." Liara smiled faintly, and for the first time it wasn't sad. Dragons never forget. Suddenly, the ground shook, a deep rumble rolling through the forest. The brothers spun around, weapons raised. In the distance, firelight flickered between the trees. Voices shouted. The soldiers had found them. "Go!" Eli shouted. "Get back inside." But Liara didn't move. Her golden eyes narrowed, and the air around her began to shimmer. The brothers could feel the power in it, a heat rising from the ground itself. Mark grabbed her arm. "You can't fight them alone." Liara looked at him, then at Eli. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "Now it's my turn." Before they could stop her, she stepped forward into the rain. The light around her grew until it swallowed her whole. The rain turned to steam as wings of silver fire burst from her back. In a single heartbeat, the young girl became a dragon again, her scales burning like molten light. She roared, and the trees shook. The soldiers screamed as she rose above the treetops. Her fire swept across the ground, not to kill, but to build a wall of flame between the forest and the valley. Eli and Mark shielded their faces as the storm of fire raged. When it ended, the soldiers had fled, and Liara was gone. The brothers ran through the smoke, calling her name, but only silence answered. On the blackened ground lay something small and shining, a silver pendant, shaped like a tear. Eli picked it up, his hands shaking. The metal was warm, almost alive. Mark whispered, "Do you think she'll really come back?" Eli closed his fist around the pendant. "She will." The forest was quiet again. The rain washed the ashes into the stream, carrying them away. The brothers stood there for a long time, watching the smoke fade into the gray morning. They didn't know that far beyond the clouds, a silver dragon flew toward the mountains, carrying their memory in her heart. That night, in the valley below, no one spoke of the fire. But those who saw the sky said they witnessed something impossible. A dragon weeping light as she disappeared into the stars. And somewhere, in that silent promise of return, began the legend that would bring her back 17 years later. 17 years had passed since that fiery night that had changed everything for Eli and Mark. The valley had aged with them. Fields grew thicker, forests deeper, and time had buried the memories of that wounded dragon girl they once hid in their barn. The brothers were no longer the same. Their hands were tougher. Their hair had turned to shades of early gray, and though they worked hard from dawn to dusk, their hearts carried a strange emptiness they never spoke of. Every spring, when the red flowers bloomed near the ridge, they both felt the same ache. An ache tied to the face of a frightened girl with golden eyes who had vanished into the night. They had long believed she was gone forever. But fate, it seemed, was not finished with them yet. It began on a night eerily similar to the one 17 years ago. The sky turned red, not from fire, but from something brighter, shimmering across the stars. The brothers were eating in silence when the air shifted. The wind carried a strange hum, soft but powerful, and their lantern flickered. Eli frowned and stepped outside. The air smelled like lightning. Mark followed, his chest tightening with something that felt like déjà vu. And then they saw it. A glowing shape descending from the clouds, too fast, too graceful to be a falling star. It landed beyond the treeline, in the same forest where they'd once found her. The same place where everything had begun. Without a word, both men ran. Old boots pounded against the wet grass, their breaths heavy in the cool night. The forest was alive again. The leaves whispered, the air pulsed, and the same strange warmth they had felt 17 years ago surrounded them. But this time, there was no wounded creature hiding in fear. Instead, in a clearing bathed in red light, stood a tall figure. Her long hair shimmered like molten gold. Her eyes glowed like twin suns, and her presence radiated a calm power that made the trees bend ever so slightly toward her. Eli stopped first, his chest rising and falling as he whispered, "No, it can't be." The woman turned. Her lips curved into a soft smile, one that carried both warmth and an ancient sadness. "You kept your promise," she said in a voice that wasn't entirely human. "You told me to come back when the world was safe. And now I am." Mark took a step forward, his throat dry. "Lyra?" he whispered, using the name they had given her all those years ago. She nodded. But she wasn't the frightened dragon girl anymore. She was radiant, beautiful, and something far greater than either of them could comprehend. When she moved, the air shimmered faintly behind her, her power leaking through the thin disguise of human form. They couldn't speak for a moment. It was like facing a legend made real. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes softening. "I have not forgotten," she said. "You saved me when no one else would. You gave me food, shelter, and kindness. My kin believed all humans were cruel and greedy, but you too proved them wrong." Her gaze flickered between them, full of something deeper, something human. "And now I have come to keep my word." Eli frowned, confused. "What word?" Lyra smiled gently. "The night before I left, I promised that when I was grown, I would return and be with those who saved me. In my world, that promise means more than life itself." Mark felt his heart skip. He looked at his brother, then back at her. "You mean?" Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "I have returned to marry you." The words hit them like thunder. For a long moment, the forest went silent, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Eli stumbled back a step. "Marry? You can't mean that. You're different?" she finished softly. "Yes, I am dragonkind, but we take human form when our hearts choose a mate among your kind. It is rare, forbidden even. But what is forbidden to those who owe their lives?" Her words carried both strength and sadness. Mark tried to speak, but his voice broke. He remembered her tears when she was just a scared child, how she had clung to Eli's arm, trembling at every sound outside the barn. And now that same girl was standing before them, powerful enough to light up the forest with a thought. "Lyra," he said quietly, "you don't owe us anything. We did what anyone would have done." She shook her head slowly. "No, you did what no one else dared to do." The wind rustled through the trees, and faint embers glowed around her like floating fireflies. She stepped closer, her eyes locking on Eli's. "You gave me my life. Let me share it with you." Eli looked at her, torn between disbelief and awe. "Lyra, you belong to a different world. You shouldn't be here." Her smile widened slightly, though her eyes shimmered with emotion. "My world sent hunters after me once, but now they will come for another reason. Because they know what I've chosen." The brothers exchanged a wary look. "What do you mean?" Mark asked. Lyra turned toward the sky, where faint red streaks began to form again, this time not falling but approaching. "They will not let me go easily," she said quietly. "My return was forbidden, but I came anyway, And now, they're coming. The brothers stared at the sky as the streaks grew brighter. Dozens of them, moving fast, like fireflies turned to meteors. The same fear that had gripped them 17 years ago returned. But this time it was mixed with something else. Determination. Eli stepped closer to Lyra, his jaw tightening. Then we'll protect you, just like before. She smiled sadly. No, she said, her voice trembling slightly. This time, I protect you. The ground began to shake. Lights flared across the horizon. The dragons were coming not to hunt, but to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Lyra stood tall, her golden hair whipping in the wind as her human form began to shimmer and fade, her true power breaking through. The brothers could only watch, hearts pounding, as the woman they once sheltered revealed what she truly was. A being of light and flame, majestic and terrifying. And as her wings spread across the sky, she turned her gaze to them one last time. No matter what happens, she whispered, remember this, kindness is never forgotten. The night exploded with light. The night sky burned once more, just like 17 years ago. But this time, it wasn't a single wounded creature falling from the stars. It was an army. Dozens of glowing shapes cut through the clouds, their roars shaking the valley, their wings spreading shadows over the land. Eli and Mark stood frozen at the edge of the forest, watching the sky come alive with fire and light. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The cows in their barn panicked, the chickens screamed, and every dog in the valley barked until their voices cracked. The world was waking up to something ancient and powerful, and the brothers knew it was all because she had returned. Lyra stood between them and the sky, her golden hair whipping in the wind as sparks of fire danced around her feet. The air shimmered with power. She looked calm, but her eyes were full of fear. A fear not for herself, but for them. They've found me, she whispered. The Dragon Council knows I've broken the ancient law. Eli stepped forward, shouting over the roaring wind. What law? Her voice trembled. No dragon can love a human. The words hit both men like a cold blade. Mark's fists clenched. Love? You mean? Lyra turned to him, her voice breaking. Yes, I chose you both. My heart belongs to those who saved me. But to them it's betrayal. To them, love with your kind is corruption. Before they could respond, the first dragon descended. A massive beast of crimson scales and molten eyes, wings slicing through the wind like blades. Its roar shook the valley, and the heat from its breath scorched the treetops. Lyra of the Golden Clan, the voice thundered, echoing like thunder across the hills. You have broken our sacred oath. Surrender yourself or burn with the humans you chose. The brothers stared in disbelief as more dragons emerged. Silver, black, green, and gold, circling above like storm clouds. Eli felt his knees weaken. Mark, he whispered. We can't fight that. But Lyra turned to them, her eyes glowing like molten suns. You won't have to. Then, before their eyes, her human form shimmered and vanished. A surge of light erupted, shaking the trees to their roots. When the light cleared, she stood revealed in her true form, a dragon unlike any they'd ever imagined. Her scales were gold mixed with white fire, her wings stretched wider than their farmhouse, and her eyes still held that same human warmth that had once trembled with fear in their barn. But now there was no fear, only fierce determination. The red dragon landed in front of her, claws gouging the earth, its hot breath steaming the grass. You disgrace your bloodline, it growled. Lyra's voice thundered in return, yet somehow it still carried the gentleness of her heart. I disgrace nothing. I honor what you've forgotten, mercy, kindness, and love. A wave of furious roars filled the air as the others closed in. The sky was a swirl of colors, red flame, blue lightning, green smoke. Eli and Mark stood behind Lyra, the heat almost unbearable, but they refused to run. They had stood by her once when she was helpless. They would not abandon her now when she stood alone against her own kind. The first attack came fast, a blast of fire aimed straight at the brothers. But Lyra roared, sweeping her wings forward, creating a barrier of golden light that deflected the flames like a wall. The blast exploded across the field, scorching the grass, but the brothers stood unharmed. Eli looked up, awestruck. "She's protecting us." Then Lyra lunged. Her claws slashed the air, colliding with the red dragon in a blinding flash. The sound of their roars echoed for miles. The two dragons clashed midair, spiraling, colliding with the force of storms. Fire burst across the night sky, painting the clouds in red and gold. The other dragons dove in, attacking together. Lyra fought with every ounce of her power, but she was outnumbered. Mark shouted helplessly, watching her struggle against 5 at once. "We have to do something." Eli turned toward the barn, his mind racing. "The beacon!" he shouted. The old distress flare. They had one left, a relic from a long-forgotten war, something their grandfather had buried for emergencies. Together, they ran to dig it out, their hearts pounding. The ground shook with every blast above them. By the time they returned to the field, Lyra was surrounded, bleeding light from her wounds, her wings trembling. Eli struck the flare, and it screamed to life, firing a blazing blue streak high into the sky. The flare exploded above the valley, lighting the world for miles. Mark grabbed his rifle. Not that it would do much against dragons, but it made him feel less helpless. Come on," he muttered under his breath. And then, something unexpected happened. The blue flare didn't fade. It lingered, pulsing in the air like it was answering something. The ground hummed. The brothers stared as a second light appeared in the distance, moving fast. Then another, and another. Within minutes, a formation of ships appeared above the clouds, metallic, human, and armed. Earth's patrol fleet had seen the beacon. The night sky turned into chaos. Dragons and ships collided in bursts of light and thunder. Missiles screamed, energy beams cut through the darkness, and fire rained from above. Eli and Mark stood together, shielding their eyes. Lyra roared, turning her flames upward. Not at the humans, but at the other dragons who attacked. "Leave them," she bellowed. "They are under my protection." But her kin wouldn't listen. The battle raged on. Dragons fell, ships burned, and the valley was consumed in fire and smoke. But in that chaos, Lyra found the strength for one final move. She soared higher, her body glowing brighter than the sun, her wings spreading wide. And then, she released everything. A blinding wave of golden light spread out, swallowing the night sky. The roar that followed was like the world itself splitting open. When the light faded, the dragons were gone. The ships hovered, scanning, cautious. But soon, they too retreated, leaving behind silence and a scorched earth that still shimmered with heat. The brothers stood, coughing from the smoke, calling her name. "Lyra!" Eli shouted. "Where are you?" And then they saw her. She lay in the field, her form shrinking back into human shape, her body weak and trembling. They ran to her side, kneeling in the ash. Her golden hair was dim now, her breathing shallow. Yet even then she smiled at them. "You are safe," she whispered. Tears filled Mark's eyes. "You saved us again." She shook her head faintly. "No, you saved me first. I only returned the gift." Eli grabbed her hand, his voice breaking. "Don't you leave us again, Lyra. Not this time." Her eyes softened, glowing faintly. "I won't," she whispered. "Not ever. But I must rest. My kind will not return. For now." The brothers stayed with her through the night, watching the dawn rise over the burned fields. The world was quiet again, but everything had changed. The valley had seen dragons, fire, and the kind of love that defied both law and nature. And as the first rays of morning light touched her face, Lyra whispered something that neither of them would ever forget, words that would echo in their hearts for the rest of their lives. "Love," she said softly, "is stronger than any fire." The morning after the battle was unlike any the valley had ever seen. The air smelled of ash and new beginnings. The once green fields were scorched black, and the forest was still smoking from the night's chaos. Yet through the haze and destruction, a soft golden glow lingered, a light that refused to fade. It came from where Lyra lay, her body half buried in soot and dust, her human form trembling but alive. Eli and Mark had not left her side. They had sat with her through the night, holding her hands, whispering her name, waiting for her eyes to open again. And when the first sunlight touched her face, she stirred. Slowly, her eyelids fluttered open, and those familiar golden eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at them in fear 17 years ago, met theirs again. But this time there was no fear, only peace. "Where am I?" she whispered softly, her voice fragile like the morning breeze. "You're home," Eli said quietly, brushing a streak of ash from her hair. "You're safe now." Lyra smiled faintly, though pain flickered in her expression. "Safe," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's something dragons rarely are." She tried to sit up, but Mark gently stopped her. "Don't move," he said. "You nearly burned half the sky last night." Lyra gave a weak laugh. "It seems I got that from spending too much time with humans." The brothers smiled, but the weight of what had happened still hung between them. The valley was ruined. The world would have questions. And above all, the two of them knew that the dragons might not forgive what she had done. "Will they come back?" Eli asked, looking at the smoky horizon. Lyra shook her head slowly. "No. The light I released wasn't only fire. It was a binding oath. It told them I have made my choice, and the heavens themselves will respect it. They will not return unless I call them." The brothers exchanged a look of relief. "Then it's over," Mark said, letting out a long breath. Lyra turned her gaze toward the rising sun. "No," she said softly. "It's not over. It's just beginning." The words sent a chill down their spines. Later that day, as they rebuilt what they could, Lyra helped them, her power now gentle instead of fierce. Where she placed her hand, burned earth turned green again. The flowers that had been turned to ash began to bloom anew. Birds returned to the trees, singing as if the valley had been reborn. The brothers watched in awe, realizing that her very presence was restoring life itself. By evening, the valley looked almost untouched, as though the battle had been nothing more than a terrible dream. But the brothers knew it had been real. They had seen dragons fight above their heads and ships burn in the sky. Humanity had come close to a war with the unknown, and all of it had started right here on their quiet farm. As the sun began to set, Lyra stood near the old oak tree where they had buried her broken scales 17 years ago. Her golden hair caught the light, making her look almost celestial. She turned to them, her expression soft and thoughtful. "Do you know why I came back?" she asked. Eli frowned. "You said it was because of your promise." Lyra nodded. "Yes, but there's more. My kind had long forgotten the meaning of compassion. We live by laws older than memory, laws that say strength rules and love is weakness. But when you two risked everything for a frightened child, you reminded me, and through me reminded my entire race, that kindness is power, that love can change fate itself." Mark looked down, humbled. "We never thought we'd change anything. We just couldn't let you die. And that," she said softly, "is what makes you human. That's what I came to protect." For a while, none of them spoke. The sound of the wind through the grass was enough. Then Lyra stepped closer, taking both their hands in hers. Her touch was warm, almost glowing. "I don't belong to one world anymore," she said. "I belong to both. And so do you now." "What does that mean?" Eli asked, confused. Lyra smiled faintly. "It means that the bond we share, the one forged in fire, fear, and love, has tied our souls together. If ever darkness rises again, you won't need to call me. I'll feel it." The brothers stood speechless. Mark finally managed to say, "Lyra, what will you do now?" She looked toward the horizon. "I'll go where I'm needed. There are others like me, half between two worlds, who need to know it's possible to live without fear, to love without shame. I'll teach them what you taught me." Eli's throat tightened. "So this is goodbye again?" Lyra stepped closer and smiled softly. "No, Eli. Not goodbye. Never goodbye. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, then turned to Mark and did the same. Her voice dropped to a whisper. This world gave me something dragons never had. A heart that beats for others. I'll always be a part of it. A part of you. Then, as the first stars appeared in the sky, her body began to glow faintly. The brothers felt warmth surround them, like standing beside a fire in the middle of winter. Slowly, her form began to lift, her hair flowing like golden flame. They reached out instinctively, but she smiled and shook her head. Don't be sad. When you look to the sunrise, you'll see me there. That's where dragons of light go, to guard what they love. And with that, she rose higher, her light brightening until it filled the valley. When it finally faded, she was gone, leaving behind only the soft scent of smoke and flowers. The brothers stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky. The night was quiet again, peaceful, but something inside them had changed forever. Weeks later, the valley began to heal completely. Grass grew thicker, harvests doubled, and strange golden flowers bloomed only on their land. People came from distant villages, calling it the Blessed Valley. Eli and Mark never told them the truth. They simply said it was hard work and luck. But every morning, when the sun rose over the ridge, they both looked at the light and smiled, because they knew who was watching. Lyra had kept her promise. And though the world might never know the story of the dragon girl who fell from the sky, the brothers carried her memory in their hearts forever. Because sometimes miracles don't stay, they simply change form. And love, once given, never really leaves. Moral of the story: true strength doesn't come from power or blood. It comes from kindness. The courage to help, to love, and to protect what's good is what makes someone truly human. Even a dragon learned that from two humble farmers. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Sci-Fi Gragon for more powerful and emotional human.